Welcome back, everybody. It's two guys and a stack of comics. I got a short stack over there. I'm Mike. This is Reed.
Andy.
Um, Welcome back to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. We have, I just got the short stack. I didn't get a chance to go into the vault and pull out a big stack today, but that's just that was for my pull list this week. A lot of great facsimiles in that batch there. But Reed and I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about comic book team up, superhero teams, and kind of like Marvel versus DC.
Yeah, no, we've been talking a lot lately about DC versus Marvel, kind of just examining the differences between the two. And I think, again, both of us kind of come from being DC fans, but loving Marvel as well. And I think both Mike and myself agree the comic book industry is much better when both of these companies are good.
Yes.
They've delivered on fantastic stories from all their characters.
So I will start off by saying I'm going to give Marvel the edge on the teams.
Yeah.
For me, I will say, like, when I was a kid, I only got 3/4 a week for allowance, and comics were 20 cents a piece, and then they went to 25 cents a piece. So that means that, I got $3 a month allowance. So that means that in any given week, I could only buy like 3 comics.
Mm-hmm.
And, I loved Flash. I loved World's Finest and Batman. I used to get Batman and Detective Comics and Flash. And then I would dabble in Marvel. My favorites were Captain America and the Falcon, Daredevil, Iron Man. And what I would do often to get my fill of Marvel was get an Avengers comic.
Yeah.
And my supplement, like if I ran out of money and I wanted to get all the superheroes in one comic, kind of stretch my quarter,
Yeah.
so to speak, I would get Justice League, and then I would get Avengers, and I would get a sampling, a good flavor of all my favorite characters in one comic. You can't go wrong. And it goes back to the genius of course, All-Star Comics in the 40s, but uh, Julie Schwartz at DC is the one who brought back the superhero team. I think it was in 1961 or 62 when he had that Brave and the Bold 29,
Yeah.
and he grouped them all together. That was the first Justice League. Brilliant, genius idea. And for a kid on a budget, it was like, how can I get? I can't get a Batman, a Superman, a Flash, and a Wonder Woman comic at the same time because I don't have enough money. But I can take a quarter and get a Justice League comic, or I can't get Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, and
Captain America.
Captain America in one comic. But I can take a quarter and buy an Avengers comic and still get an adventure out of it. So brilliant idea, wonderful, and they've done so well for both companies over the years. They're really flagship titles that have carried the genre forward for 6 decades now, so it's amazing. But I do give Marvel the edge because the Avenger comics, um, I think Doctor Doom came out of Avengers, right? He used to
He
show
originated in Fantastic Four, which, another team.
Fantastic Four.
And he's also been an Avengers threat. Yeah.
I remember him in the 70s being like one of the big bads in those early storylines when I was a kid. And I thought, oh my gosh, that guy. I never bought Fantastic Four, but I did buy Avengers and I think that's where I got a taste of Doctor Doom. And I was like, man, he's such a cool villain. But then also, Marvel took it another step up and also did the X-Men.
Yeah.
Which really also got revamped in the 70s. A very strong team. And I don't know that DC has two flagship team up comics. I mean, you could say the Teen Titans.
Teen Titans, Birds of
But,
Prey.
but
Yeah.
it
No,
doesn't have the
the same way.
gravitas that Justice League doesn't have the gravitas of X-Men and Avengers. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I would have to, as much as it pains me as a DC fan at times, to have to admit they failed on something. I think from a team up standpoint, it's not even necessarily close. I think Marvel, to the credit of creators, even back as far as, Stan and Jack with Fantastic Four, they created these characters that fit so well in those dynamics, and that you can kind of tell the personalities of like the Fantastic Four, right? You've got Johnny, who's kind of the hothead, and Ben's the tough guy, and Sue's the more kind of level-headed, caring one. Reed's the leader with the brains of the operation. They just work really well together. What's so interesting for me in Marvel, the characters, they can work solo, but I think they do actually work better as teams. I think a Mr. Fantastic's solo comic would be kind of boring, but in the dynamic of the Fantastic Four, it's absolutely one of my favorite books. I think you highlighted it. The X-Men, to me, is the ultimate example of team building in that Wolverine is the only character I think he can really pull out of the X-Men, and he works on his own. But Cyclops, Storm, Nightcrawler, Beast, Jean Grey, Colossus, I mean, the roster just goes on for so long, but they've done such a good job of unique power sets that complement each other. I think the other thing they've really invested in is there's a lot of great dynamics within those teams. You have Wolverine is like really good friends with Nightcrawler, who's more of a religious person, so that always kind of brings out a softer side of Wolverine. You've got him and Colossus, who team up and have their own kind of special moves and things like that. And then yeah, like you mentioned, the Avengers. I think this is one of the reasons that the teams that Marvel's had, I think they conceptualized them a little better when they put them together. And I think that's why the movies did so well. Those team ups that the MCU was able to produce for years, it really worked because the dynamics really helped on screen. These
Yeah,
different personalities that would come together. I do feel Justice League individually has some great characters who I think solo are a little better than Marvel's. But in a team dynamic, it's interesting in that I think sometimes the power sets of some of the DC characters are a little too similar. And so it's
yeah.
kind of like they almost have to nerf one of the characters to make it work. Because like at a certain point in the Justice
Yeah,
League adventure,
yeah.
you're like, wouldn't you just have Superman do all of that?
Oh, but he's busy this week.
Yeah.
He's off on, yeah.
And it never, I thought, they really didn't build a lot of relationships through Justice League, at least with the primary ones. I know you've
Yeah.
got some later team ups with stuff like Justice League International, where like Blue Beetle and Booster Gold are friends and things like that. But in
We're
terms of
talking
the
about
dynamics
classic.
of the classics, Batman, Superman, Flash, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, really, Batman and Superman have a strong relationship. Wonder Woman gets along with everybody, but like you don't see Batman and the Flash work together that often. They've done some recently, but not a ton. Batman and Green Lantern don't really have a huge dynamic as compared to Marvel. What's interesting is I feel like because of the creatives they've had, you kind of can gauge the relationship of each character in the team to each other.
I
Where
think
it,
what
yeah, I don't
what
think it does as
happened,
well with that.
I think what happened was you go back to the 60s and Stan crafted Fantastic Four as a team up comic, but
Hmm.
he crafted those characters to work together as a team.
Yeah,
Whereas Julie Schwartz just took their flagship characters and put them all in a room together. So
yeah,
Stan had the forethought to think of, this character should be like this, and this personality should be like that. And that I think set the template for everything to come. And he again, like he took the Avengers and kind of pulled everybody together like Julie did with Justice League. But he crafted I mean, there was good stories with them. And then of course the X-Men was like a universe unto itself
hmm
almost, before there was different MCU universes.
yeah,
Um, they lived like in their own little world there. And yeah, they had to get revamped. And, in the 70s, they really took off. But just great dynamic teams. And you could tell he really thought like, okay, I want to build a team up comic, but let's make it interesting like I did with Fantastic Four, and have the differences of personalities and have them play off of one another. They were more well crafted, whereas Justice League was just like okay, these are our top
Here's
characters,
our
and
top 5 books. Let's put all those characters
let's
in.
put them in, which is a great idea unto itself and very
Yeah.
novel for the time. And so yeah, that was really cool.
I think the other thing too is I think DC, the power sets when you look at what Flash, Superman, and Wonder Woman can do to create a threat that actually needs the entire Justice League.
Yeah,
Um, it's very few and far between that they can do that and do it well. I think Darkseid and kind of the New Gods and stuff like that, that stuff that Kirby created, really started pulling some threads in that work well with that. Um, the
gotta
Avengers,
be. It's got to be something big. It can't
yeah,
just be a gigantic starfish from outer space.
oh, yeah, Starro, not exactly getting done.
Let's get a little
Um,
more creative if we can, please.
the Avengers, I think, because they all have a good amount of power, but even Thor, I think Thor's probably the only one who suffers a bit because he's a little more powerful in his individual book as opposed to the Avengers. But overall, Iron Man, Captain America, all of them, a lot of threats that can present the Avengers really make sense.
Yeah,
The Avengers don't have that sort of Superman answer of like, man, who is a threat to Superman? And I
nobody.
think, the Avengers really, because of the way they built their teams and their power sets for their characters, it's a lot easier to buy them working together. I think the other thing that works as well, and I think this is like you said, I think they were crafted that way. I think a lot of it feels like they were crafted that way, certainly for the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, where you can kind of see the building blocks that Stan and Jack and all the creatives that were involved with the formation of those things were they always designed to be as a team. I
Yeah,
think that's the interesting part is there's so many X-Men characters I really love, but Wolverine's the only one I would ever pick a solo book out of.
yeah.
Nightcrawler is probably one of my 10 favorite superhero characters. I've never really been able to hold a sustained interest in him when he has a solo book for any amount of time, and there's a reason they haven't lasted. And I think the X-Men on their own though, there's just a special magic that's been brought together, and some of that's the creatives, and I think guys like Chris Claremont who wrote the X-Men for a while. You had in the 70s that they did the Uncanny X-Men, kind of the relaunch Giant Size X-Men where they brought in Storm and all that. I think they've just done a very good job of revamping the roster. The closest I've seen DC get where a team book that works like that is Teen Titans. I think some of the classic 80s stuff of like new Teen Titans, I think that was Wolfman on those where you kind of had
Marv
Dick Grayson
Wolfman.
as
Yeah,
Nightwing and
yeah.
Starfire and Cyborg and Beast Boy. I think they're good. But I'll be honest, I've never been able to be a huge Titans fan. Um,
They inspired, great animated television.
yes.
And when you go back to the grandfather of all those shows, it was my favorite show on Saturday morning was the Super Friends.
Yep.
However cheesy it was,
Old
like
school
I come
man.
back, like I could not wait for that show to come on TV on Saturday morning, and I knew I was getting cheated because it was nothing like the comics. Although they tried to mirror one another in the 70s and cheese it down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how exciting it was. You got to go back to a world where there was no internet, only one superhero movie, and it hadn't even come out yet.
Yeah.
And just to have your favorite superheroes on TV, it was just amazing, to see that. But then, the X-Men show of the 80s and 90s. I mean, that was a great show that got a lot of people interested in comics.
Yeah. Well, no, I think the other team dynamic, to bring up as well, uh, Marvel's villain groups, whether it's Magneto and the Brotherhood, where they've created so many good characters who work in kind of conflict and develop individual rivalries with the X-Men characters. I think you look at the Sinister Six, you always give Spider-Man a run for his money, and that roster changes, which you kind of always have that core group that fits there. They've always just done a very good job of them. I think there's Masters of Evil as well, who've been Avengers threats with Baron Zemo and things like that. They've just done a very good job of putting team dynamics together, and I think I do believe that's why the MCU worked a little better than the DC. There's other reasons, obviously creative issues and
The
wrestling.
animated Avengers show.
Yeah, I think
That
Yeah,
was really
Society of
cool.
Heroes one that came out, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, there's just been, I think that to me the Marvel characters is interesting in that I look at my kind of pull list of Marvel, you know, Daredevil, Spider-Man, Wolverine. I kind of buy them solo, but I don't really buy a lot of extended runs on Iron Man or Cap or those guys alone. But I'll be honest, I always pick up Avengers. I think it's a dynamic that works, and I would even as a DC guy, may begrudgingly say it, but I have to give Marvel, I think, a substantial edge in the team dynamics that they put together. And I give almost all the credit to that to the creatives they put on there. I think
absolutely.
they've and Mike, you can tell me if you disagree on this. I feel like Marvel has prioritized their group books and put their best creatives on that,
I
where
mean, it's
they
how
go and
Marvel.
kind of seem to be an afterthought.
Yeah, it really was. And it's really how the Marvel Universe was created as a group with Fantastic Four. That was the very inception. They were founded on group. And from that moment of inception, they were crafted to work together. And when they went forward and crafted other team up books, they came from the same mindset, which was, interesting characters, interesting tension and character dynamics between one another. And of course, great villains that rose to the level of the
Of
threat
the team.
level of a team up a storyline. So yeah,
Yeah, so from our end, we'd say Marvel has the edge on the teams thing, but let us know what you think. Do you think DC or Marvel has better team dynamics of the superhero teams or even supervillain teams? Always great to hear from you guys in the comments. You may not agree with us, but we certainly want to lay our argument out there. And if you got some great points, we always love to read them. I think it's one of the cool things is for Mike and I, this is just a way to talk comics and kind of get our ideas out there and what we think. But it's always great to see what you guys think and your opinions as well. So if you enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, comment below. We'll be happy to read those and get back to you and let us know what you think. But thank you for joining us. We hope you have a happy holidays and we'll see you in our next video.